Welcome to Utopia Talks. Today we will be exploring the topic of the future of nature conservation, exploring the question, what if we can save species and habitats from extinctions? Now, before we get started, I just want to dive in a little bit deeper, sharing a warm welcome to everybody tuning in tonight. Tonight, tomorrow morning, we all know we're joined with many different time zones all around the world. A little bit of fun facts as a signature before we get started. Our three major cities tuning in for this live session is Singapore, Bali, and Mumbai. The youngest person watching is 15 years old, and our oldest joining us tonight is 60. We already received 25 questions from the audience already during the pre-registration. We will try and address all of these, and if not, remember, for all of you those that are watching, there will actually be a Q&A section at the end of our panel discussion where you stand a chance to unmute yourself, show your screen, and ask the panelists directly a question. My name is Malati, I'm 19 years old, I'm the founder of Youthtopia, and I will be the co-host of this evening's event. I will be joined by my other co-host, Esta.
Hi Malati, thank you so much. And hi everyone, my name is Esta, I'm from the Youthtopia team and I'll be co-hosting tonight's event.
Now, without further ado, the brief of what Youthtopia Talks is all about, it's one of the many initiatives we ran throughout the summer of 2020. You know, despite the pandemic, we believe in providing an online space for young changemakers to share knowledge regarding global issues and potential solutions for sustainable change. The first webinar we hosted was all about plastic-free July and beyond. We had an incredible lineup of speakers joining us, similar to when we did our second Youthtopia Talk session, everything about racial justice is climate justice. You know, one of the many issues rampant in today's society is determining the future of nature conservation.
Yes,
right? According,
right. And according
go for it, Esta.
No worries, excuse me. And yeah, according to the WWF, humans are behind the current rate of species extinction at the moment, which is at least 100 to 1,000 times higher than nature intended. We've seen an astonishing 60% decline in the size of populations of mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians in just the last 40 years. Beyond species extinction, the world's forests, swamps, lakes, plains, and other habitats continue to disappear as they are harvested for human consumption and cleared to make way for agriculture, housing, roads, pipelines, and the other hallmarks of industrial development. Without a strong plan to create terrestrial and marine protected areas, important ecological habitats will continue to be lost. And so to discuss the possibilities of conserving and protecting our environment now and in the future, I'm really excited to, please join us in welcoming our incredible lineup of speakers and change makers today. We have Aishwarya Sidhar, wildlife filmmaker and photographer. We also have Felix Finkbeiner from the Plant for the Planet and Nesha Ichida from the Indonesian Manta project. All speakers are part of Youthopia's Circle of Youth. Yay! Hello, everyone. Hello, Aishwarya, Felix, and Nesha. Thank you for joining us today. Another fun fact, we're actually juggling with 4 different time zones just from our speakers and from the team right now. So, good evening, good morning, good afternoon from wherever you guys are. Thank you so much. We're incredibly happy to see your faces joining in tonight. And I think I'll hand it over to our speakers to just briefly introduce themselves and what they're up to at the moment. Let's start with Felix. Why don't you start us off? And then to Aishwarya and then Nesha.
I'd be happy to. So I've been involved in tree planting with Plant for the Planet. This is an organization we founded 13 years ago. Back then we were a couple of 9 and 10-year-olds. And since then we've had children and youth all around the world join us in planting trees and trying to convince the world to plant 1 trillion trees. That's our big mission, and that's most of what I do. And I'm also right now in a lab in Zurich in Switzerland, where I'm working on my PhD in environmental sciences.
Amazing, Felix. Everybody, did you just catch on to what he was saying? 1 trillion trees all around the world. I know Felix now personally, speaking on the same stages. The last one we shared, probably of the year, I don't know about you, Felix, but it's been pretty quiet. The last big one was in Davos at the World Economic Forum, where you really made your big pow, we're gonna do all of these planting trees initiative. Aishwarya, I'm moving on to you. Tell us, you're coming in from India. What is your work and how would you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, Melati. Hi, everyone out there. So, like Esther introduced me, I'm a wildlife filmmaker. I'm a presenter and a photographer from India. India is a very beautiful country with a lot of biodiversity and a lot of natural wealth. And currently, I'm hosting a talk show for Discovery Channel India on endangered species and the future. It's called Nature for Future, which is all about protecting endangered species and ensuring that the future generation also gets to see them. I've just completed filming one of the most beautiful and the boldest wild Bengal tigress named Maya from the forests of central India. And so the film is in post-production right now and should be released probably next year. And I'm also working on the side for environmental and wetland protection with the government and for the city of Mumbai. So yeah, a whole lot of things going on.
Amazing, amazing. Let me just quickly, give an applause for Aishwarya and also Felix. That's great news, Aishwarya. I'm excited to see your show with Discovery Channel India and also, your film that was coming up that you mentioned on Maya.
Yes.
Right, Maya the tiger. Excited
Yes.
about that. Congratulations on all these achievements. And I think we can, move on to Nesha. Nesha, would you mind coming in and introducing yourself?
Cool. Thanks, Esther and Mel, for inviting me to the talk. So my name is Nesha Ichida, and I'm from the Indonesian Manta project. We basically work with manta rays and marine megafauna in Indonesia, but mainly in the Sabu Sea. So my main job is basically to build a community-based conservation specifically for marine and basically help the local coastal community to live and thrive with nature. But also there's a lot of research going on with the marine megafauna like manta rays. So my job involves waiting around for manta rays and taking photos of them. That's why Mel says she really loves my Instagram. But right now I'm stuck in the jungle of Jakarta. But also we're currently working with a couple of NGOs as well to do the first shark reintroduction to the wild in the world. But that one is still a project under the radar, but super excited for it and definitely will help a lot of species.
Amazing. Nesha, for all of the ocean lovers watching and tuning in tonight, you should definitely head over to the work that Nesha is doing. She's like a mermaid spending all of her time, well, not a mermaid, like almost like this kick-ass mermaid scientist, super smart data collector, right? And I think you'll have a really interesting narrative to bring into tonight's discussion. So again, to all the panelists joining in tonight, thank you for attending. This is Utopia. This is what we're all about, bringing young change makers who are at the front line straight into your screens. So with that, I will let Esther kick off with the first warm-up question that we have for this evening's discussion.
Yes, thanks, Malatia. As per Youthtopia Talks tradition, we like to keep it, we like to open it up with a hot potato or two or three for our panel speakers here. So I think I want to ask Felix first. Our first warm-up question: how would you, Felix, describe nature conservation to a 3-year-old? Please take it away, Felix.
This is crazy difficult. I guess there's so many, an uncountable number of different species out there in the world. And all of these species help us humans in some sort of small way. And we could lose a few of them. And that's a very natural process that happens all the time. But because of so many bad choices that we as a society have been making for hundreds of years now, we're losing them way too quickly, hundreds of them each day. And because of that, at some point, we will get to a very, very dangerous point when our society will not be able to continue in the same way. So what we have to do is that we have to rapidly slow down this loss of tree species. Not tree species, all plant and animal species, but trees are particularly cool.
Gotcha. Thanks, Felix. Thank you for that. I mean, to all the 3-year-olds watching, hopefully that's a good answer for you right there. What do you think, Melati?
I was just going to say, Esther, I don't even think the 3-year-olds, for me, that was like a perfect aha,
Yes.
And Felix, I caught your bias there on the trees. We know Plant for the Planet is all about trees, but yes, nature conservation is about all of those ecosystems. And, it is, the warm-up question is really for the intent of setting the tone of what is nature conservation. It's become such a strong buzzword. We hear it in every conference room. It's at the headlines of almost every article you read about. But what actually is it? So passing the hot potato on to Aishwarya, a little bit of a different angle. How would you explain nature conservation to a politician?
Oh my God, politicians in India don't understand what nature conservation means. And I've been trying to do that for the last 2 years to get them to save the wetlands, and they don't just understand what nature conservation means. For them, it's like they see a patch of forested land or a marshland as the next place for an economic project to come, possibly to earn more money and build bigger concrete houses with swimming pools for their parties and for their own enjoyment. But they do not just know that our natural wealth has to be protected, has to be preserved. They just don't get it. So it's extremely difficult to try and make them understand what conservation means and why should we protect the environment. But if I have to possibly explain to them, I will tell them that if you want to live, go and save our wetlands and forests, possibly for your children. Then they might listen. I hope so.
Here's hoping. Amen to that. Thank you, Aishwarya. I appreciate that honesty, right? I mean, the reactions are all different across the world. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more later on during our discussion on how we can, mobilize the government and everyone, all parties involved, to really invest and care in nature conservation. So thank you for that, Aishwarya. Let me pass on the hot potato to Nesha here and ask you, how would you describe nature conservation, Nesha, to your parents, or maybe mom and or dad?
This is a hard question because I've been trying to explain it better throughout the years that I've learned conservation. And it's never, at the beginning, I think you guys understand, as youth, you're just full of rage. Why are my parents not understanding this? So it's full of, emotion. But throughout the years, I've learned that, even your parents, you have to treat them like, strangers. You have to educate them like you don't know them. And I've actually just begin to, develop the actual sentences to describe it to my family, which is, nature conservation is basically when nature and humans thrive together. If without humans, we don't really need nature conservation. It will thrive on its own. So the simple way to say it is, nature needs biodiversity. It's as simple as, if you only eat rice every single day, will you be healthy? No. You need a lot of vegetables. You need a lot of diversity in your food. Same goes to nature. If nature has so much biodiversity, humans will thrive as well. That's it.
Nesha, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I think each and every one of you brought such an incredible perspective, and it's fun to see how you answer questions differently, because in one way, shape, or form, they all lead back to the same thing. And what we're discussing here in nature conservation is, at the end of the day, a holistic way of living in harmony, right? And Nesha, what you did just there, if you eat nasi or rice on its own, it's not going to be, one, not a yummy meal, and secondly, not healthy for you, right? So thank you for putting that into such a great perspective. Moving on, I would love to sort of explore a little bit more in depth than a warm-up question, but explain to us a little bit, what was your aha moment? Because I think that this is something that our audience as well is always intrigued by. What is it that triggered you to get out there and start taking action? Aishwarya, maybe we can start with you over there in India.
Okay. So for me, possibly as a child, I have been going out a lot because my dad's a nature lover, and he used to take me out for treks and camping outdoors, bird watching sessions, and that's how I really liked being outdoors in the wild. But that main moment, you can say, was probably when I saw my first tiger in the wild. And that particular moment when I saw such a huge male tiger walking towards me in a quiet jungle, that time I really fell in love with wildlife. And a few weeks later, I also got to know that the same tiger had been poached, because they were in India, there was illegal trade, and the tiger was probably killed for its body parts. So at that point, I really felt very bad. And that's when I maybe decided that I should not at least allow more species in the world to reach the same fate. I really didn't want that. So I wanted to be part of a bigger movement to save our natural world. And that's how it all started for me.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Wow, what an experience. Well, you were very young when you were first exposed to.
I think it was 10, yeah, probably 10 or 11.
Amazing. I would have freaked out seeing a tiger, when I'm just 10 years old. But wow, that is an amazing story. And thank you for sharing that to all of us and sharing your aha moment for you. And I hear you on that. Thank you. And I think I'd like to pass it on to Felix now. And perhaps Felix can enlighten us on your aha moment, Felix. When was the moment that you thought trees are it? This is it, or anything else beyond that?
Well, it was a bit of a process, but I guess the first important moment was that when I was 5, my aunt gave me this big polar bear, like plush polar bear, which was bigger than I was at the time. And that made the polar bear my favorite animal. And a few years later, when I was 9, I was in 4th grade at the time, I found out in class that the polar bear was in danger because of climate change. This was the heyday of using the polar bear to explain climate change to people. And that really affected me. And then I was supposed to give a little presentation in my class about climate change. And while preparing that, I found out about a fantastic woman from Kenya. She unfortunately passed away in 2011, but she received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004 for her fantastic work. And she had started an incredible array of different fantastic campaigns in Kenya over her long life. But one of her most impactful ones was the Greenbelt movement. It was actually a very simple idea. What she did is she paid local women a small amount of money to plant trees, which was fantastic because not only did it conserve the environment, bring back water sources, protect against further desertification, but also she figured out a way to combine nature conservation with female empowerment. Very simply because for many of these people participating, for many of these women specifically participating in this campaign, that was the first independent income from their families. So it was a truly inspiring moment, but I was 9 years old. I didn't understand the full complexity of the fantastic work she was doing. I only understood, that trees help against climate change and trees help to save the polar bear. And this is why I told my classmates that we should start planting trees. And actually, our initial goal back then was to plant 1 million trees in each country of the world. Of course, an absurd goal, but I don't think any of us knew back then how much 1 million was or even how many countries existed. So we just got started and planted some trees.
Amazing. From polar bear to trees to a heroine in Kenya. Amazing process there, Felix. I appreciate that. Thank you for telling your story. And I think I'm interested in Nesha's story now. When was your aha moment, Nesha? What was it like for you to suddenly fall in love with manta rays? Or maybe there was something else before that?
My story is a bit interesting because I didn't grow up with family or parents that was in conservation or nature. So I actually was the exact opposite. I had illegal birds as pets and all the bad things that's going on in nature. But after that, my dad took me diving for the first time when I was 14. And I thought, wow, it's a whole nother world down here. It's really cool. And I definitely just went, oh, what kind of job involves this every day? And found marine biology on Google at 14. And I thought, oh, that's cool. Animals and ocean, sorted. I'll do that one. I didn't even know how to get there. But then I went volunteering at a wildlife center, a wildlife rescue and rehabilitation center in North Sulawesi, where they basically rescue animals that was being illegally smuggled as pets or other things to other countries from Indonesia. And that's basically where I learned that, okay, so it's not really good to have wildlife as pets. And then all these animals that was taken in the wild go through so much to be able to become pets and not really being in the wild next to us. And it's just horrendous amount of process, and a lot of animals die. And obviously to get the animals back into their original habitat, it's so hard because you have to go through so much rehabilitation, and like it takes a lot of money. It sometimes takes decades before they can even go back to the wild, and sometimes even then when they do go back to the wild, sometimes they don't survive. So I thought, okay, there definitely is more than just being a marine biologist. There's some aspect that needs to be done in Indonesia, knowing that, you know, even on land, this is happening. What the hell is going on in the ocean? And when I started watching Nat Geo and all the documentaries, oh, wow, okay, we're not doing that well, even underwater, shark finning and overfishing and everything else. And I just, you know, dedicated myself right then and there that I want to focus on being a conservation scientist. So that's when I become, yeah, at 17, I guess I would say.
At 17 years old, see, this is why, like, all of these special moments, whether it's a singular moment or a collection of moments, and I'm sure those of you that are watching and joining in tonight, you must have this one moment, otherwise you wouldn't be here, I'm convinced. You must have had this one moment that felt like, that set a trigger in you, that set an alarm clock of questions, where you started down this road of, okay, how can I do something about the wrongness or the injustice in the world? What can I do to play an active role? So that leads me, my friends, to my next question, which is a little bit more about tangible change, right? Which is what we're about in Youthtopia. How would you, as frontline change makers, tell the people watching and joining in tonight, what were some of your first actions that you did in either, you know, Felix, you have experience in, you know, starting your own organization, but similarly to Nesha and Aishwarya, what did you do as individuals to start taking action? What was your top 3 action points? Nesha, I see you nodding a lot. Do you wanna kick this off?
Sure. I guess, well, as you already know, I'm part of the co-founders of Diversity in Action, which is, you already had Tanya in your previous talks. That basically rolled into something that was very big, but that was just my passion against plastic pollution. But my heart definitely still goes into marine protected areas and all the wildlife in the ocean that was still not being heard. So I still focus on that. But obviously, as a youth, it's sometimes really hard to focus on, you know, marine megafauna. You're not really an expert at it, and I'm not saying, you know, youth can't start anything, but like on that level, I knew that I couldn't just, you know, go around catching sharks and tagging them. I don't have the money for it. So what you can do, definitely the top 3, is to find organizations just nearest to you and put yourself out there. What I found my current supervisor and boss when I was 18, and I just told her, I want to work with manta rays. Can you, you know, if you have internships or opportunities, please find me. And obviously right there and then there, I just got out of high school. So I'm like, who's this kid? Doesn't have any experience. I'm not going to put her with manta rays. But 4 years later, she came up whilst I was still doing my online degree and offered me a full-time job right then and there when I was even, you know, qualified for it, and she gave the opportunity. So my first advice to all the youth out there, you don't really have to start a new NGO to be involved in conservation. Just find the ones that are already there and support them and give your all. And even them, they need more fresh brains and skills and, you know, creative minds. Yeah.
Love that. Thank you, Nesha. I appreciate your humility, you know, admitting that, yeah, maybe like you believe that, yes, young change makers can do and start so many things, but at the same time, right, we have to reach out. We have to seek information from, you know, our seniors, those are experts in the field, especially in your field of marine conservation and whatnot. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing kind of, you know, the start of your journey into the world that you're in now in the oceans. And now I'm interested to hear from Aishwarya. What were your first actions in the beginning of your journey since you met Maya, for instance, Maya the tiger? What was it like for you?
Oh, it was amazing for me when I first saw Maya in the wild. In fact, I saw her as a subadult, as a little cub. And from there, I have traced her journey across 6, 7 years to what she is today, that is ruling the largest territory in the forest. And she's a mother now to 5 cubs this season. Unfortunately, I cannot go there because India is under lockdown. Otherwise, you would have probably found me in the jungles of Tadoba. But cannot go there as of now. So I'm stuck here, like Nesha said, in the urban jungle of Mumbai. So for me, my top 3 actions would probably, as a child, as a teenager, I had started doing these campaigns in schools across Mumbai. So that was because I started seeing that a lot of things like climate change, I got to know about climate change and the fact that our environment needs our attention as of now. So we used to do these anti-plastic drives and then tree plantation drives and Earth Hour programs, Earth Day celebrations. And I've organized a lot of these events across many schools, and I think it's reached about maybe 2 to 3 lakh students. And I'm really glad that a lot of students now come up to me and tell me that we also want to be a part of this movement for protecting nature. And then we take them out to the jungle, the local forests over here, the local marshlands and wetlands, and show them the bird life that exists there. So they are really intrigued and they're very happy watching nature in its purest form, that is in the forests. And after that, I've now moved into filming and photography because I feel that the visual medium is very strong. So when you show people something, they understand that much better, and you protect ultimately what you love, and you love what you understand, and you understand much better when you see something. So what you see, it kind of influences you. So now I take photographs and films where I hope somewhere down the line it will inspire people to love our planet and to also be change makers and fight for our planet.
Spoken like a true filmmaker and photographer. Love that energy, Aishwarya. Thank you for sharing, your journey from organizing just, grassrooted events and campaigns in your local community to eventually, taking that as inspiration to what you do now, what you contribute to the world of nature conservation through your films and photographs. So thank you for that, Aishwarya. Now, passing it on to Felix. How about you, Felix? What were your first top 3, or just, your first actions when you started to feel inspired by your cause, the cause for nature conservation?
Well, it was really that one main moment that then spiraled, to be honest. It was that first tree I planted with my classmates there back in 2007. And I guess what made us incredibly lucky at the time is that 2 local journalists reported about that first tree we had planted. And this is how some other local schools heard about it and started planting some trees as well. And I guess shortly after that, I got into giving, very, very simple, like presentations based on that first presentation I'd given in my class about climate change and polar bears and so on. So I started traveling to some local schools, telling them about why trees are so important and why they should be planting trees. And that's how that spread. And this is really what Plant for the Planet and our work was for many years, trying to get ever more children, youth to start joining us. Yeah, quite a few years later that we really started working more professionally on nature conservation, especially through our work on the Yucatan Peninsula in southern Mexico, where we are trying to restore 20,000 hectares of destroyed forests, which is, to just give you a sense of scale, about the size of Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. And yeah, we've got a great team of 100 employees there, planning to plant 3 million trees in 2020 to bring that nature back. So like over these 13 years of our work, it's truly evolved a lot. But it started off with that essentially one tree. That was my main thing I ever did.
Thank you. And Felix, the way that you even explained it by just sharing that kind of visual of, it started with that one tree. Sometimes it starts with that one symbolic action, whether that's the experience with the tiger in India, Nesha for you here in Indonesia, it is that one experience. And then it's just about having the guts to go out there and speak from the heart. I think for those of you tuning in again tonight, you see here 3 incredible examples of frontline young change makers, and what the common theme is here of how they have taken action. Their first steps have really just been about talking about it, and also finding and connecting with something that they're dramatically passionate about, right? Felix, obviously trees, we hear it, we see it. Aishwarya found her connection with this tiger at 10, 14, and developed a passion for filming and photography, managed to turn that into something, building out the connection for more people. And Nesha here with, really stating that fact, like, I'm young, but I want that position. I know that determination. So speak out, get out there on the front lines. I think that's a common thing we're hearing from our speakers and our circle of youth joining us tonight. Another question though, because, when we discover the ways that we start taking action, there also comes a moment where we're met with resistance. People that don't necessarily agree with us, people that have a different perspective or a different way of seeing things. How would you describe and explain some of the biggest challenges that we're facing that prevent us from actually changing? What is it? Aishwarya, it may be different for you in India, and why don't you kick us off with some of the barriers you see in play from preventing us to actually conserve nature?
The first barrier that I probably see the most over here is the greed for development. Because we as a country, we project that we are like the developing stage still, and we want to reach the position that a US today occupies, so being very highly developed nation. But in that quest for money, for power, for this high class life, we somewhere are losing out on protecting our natural wealth in India, because we are really a biodiverse nation like Indonesia, rich in natural wealth, and we just don't seem to care about that. So it's all about replacing forests with highways. Indiscriminately, you just sell off forest land for mining, and this is not done. So the first, probably the biggest challenge that we face in this country is the greed for development and the so-called economic progress, which is not sustainable, which will probably be our own doom, the rate at which we are going.
Agreed. Thank you so much for pointing that out, Aishwarya. I think that is a point that a lot of us kind of overlook, especially, I know, and that resonated a lot with me, because I come from Jakarta, I was born and raised here. And despite, my passion for nature conservation and the environment, there's always that kind of, just to be frank, that disconnect, right, with me and the nature that's out there that I rarely see. All I see is a concrete jungle.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. So thank you for pointing that out. And I think we can dig a little deeper on that after we explore the answers of Felix and
sure.
Nesha. I think that's a very interesting point. So thank you for that. But let's hear from Felix. How about you, Felix? What are the barriers or challenges that you see or have faced throughout this process?
I think there's really 2 parts we're talking about, right? Nature conservation and nature restoration, right? We've already destroyed so many ecosystems where we have to do our best to bring them back. And I think both parts here have 2 distinct challenges. Obviously, what Plan for the Planet mainly does is in the restoration space, and that's also what I'm looking at in my research here. And I think a huge part of it is our lack of knowledge in that regard, because restoration is incredibly difficult, because we have to answer so many questions in the process about which species do we restore, do we actively restore, in the sense of for instance, planting them or seeding them so that other species can then return. And so much can go wrong in that process that it's truly incredibly difficult. And there's a real question if you can describe work like what we are doing at Plant for the Planet, where we're planting trees even as restoration, because restoration truly implies that you're bringing back that full complexity of what used to exist through that work. And of course, we can't do that. We're doing our best, but we are very far away from achieving that. And at the same time, in forest conservation, I feel like you all, or many of you here on the panel, have a much better understanding of that than I do. But of course, a big challenge is that most of that beautiful nature in the richest part of the world was already destroyed so long ago that we can't do much protection there, which means that most of the protection now has to happen in countries where the institutional structures necessary for such protection are maybe not as strong as we would need them to be. Not that these institutional structures are always that great in countries of the global north, for instance. If the most beautiful rainforests existed in the US today, I don't think I would be much more comfortable than them existing in Indonesia, of course. But it does mean that we have to use institutional structures that are not as democratic, not as powerful, and not as dedicated to this cause as we would like to for this. So it's a huge, immense struggle.
I think, Felix, you know, the fact that you pointed out the nature conservation and nature restoration, two totally different and yet aligned in the similar spaces, is a point that we had to put out there, right? And I'd love to bounce back also of the other speakers, what their thoughts initially are on it. But to your point of, you know, missing data collection, the barriers being missing data collection, right? And the systemic support or the systemic change that we need, or the support is just simply not there. Nesha, interesting for you now to pick it up, being here in Indonesia. I know a lot of our viewers are tuning in from here. I see in the comments, I'm from Jakarta, I'm from Sumatra, a lot of people tuning in from Indonesia. What is your perspective on some of the challenges that we have right here that prevents us from changing?
I think the Felix and Aishwarya really summed up as well for Indonesia, especially when it comes to what you said, Felix, about nature conservation and nature restoration is completely separate but sort of intertwined. And most of Indonesia is on the verge of the same pathway as what happened in the West, basically. And what Aishwarya said, this is like basically we're a developing country, we're trying to also develop our nation, but also trying to conserve it, and also a combination of most of our people are not as educated yet when it comes to nature conservation. So how do we educate them, but making sure that they can thrive, but also making sure that nature is also thriving? It's a complex problem that we continuously trying to solve in nature conservation. But I think one of the most profound experience that I had last year was when I went to Raja Ampat. If anyone doesn't know where Raja Ampat is, it's like the center basically of marine biodiversity in the world. And when I went there, that was my first time, and I've been dreaming of going there for 10 years since I first started diving, and I finally went there. And when I got there, I thought it was already pristine from the start. And then I found my supervisor saying that actually back in 20 years ago, this was a major shark finning camp. Fish bombing was everywhere. All the stuff was like, you know, all illegal fishing fleet was here. And then he would take us to these sites where he would say, back in 2001, this was completely a rubble underwater. And then when you go in, your mind is completely blown because it's like a complete coral reef, 100% coverage with full of fish that I've never even seen in most reefs. It's just, and he said like, this happened in 20 years. It's possible that this happened in 20 years. I think like when you work in nature conservation, you kind of hope that it'll come back, but you kind of don't know when it will come back. But the fact that there's tangible solution and tangible proof that that can happen. But obviously in combination with, you know, we're trying to develop our nation, and most of our countries that needs conservation, it's not really a rich country, that we kind of, you know, started to beg with all the Western countries, please give us money. And some of them don't really want to give us money if we don't have enough data. That's also a combination in Indonesia. We don't have enough data when it comes to nature. So we're completely like a complex problem of like, we don't have data, we're trying to solve it, we're trying to save it, we're trying to save the people. Okay, how do you do it in 10 years? It's like, okay, how do you do it? But my always like advice to people is take it step by step. Just focus on the now. Don't really worry about the future yet. Otherwise, you'll get eco-anxiety every day.
Ooh, yes, agree. Thank you for that. Thank you for mentioning eco-anxiety. That is true. And, you know, wow, just hearing all of that, all the challenges in our beautiful country, you know, just summed up and all that complex, you know, in that complexity, also echoing with Aishwarya and also Felix said, and the barriers and challenges that they see in their communities and their countries really is a lot to handle, a lot to take in, right? And I appreciate how you shared your story on how, you know, just by leaving nature, just leaving, like your experience with Raja Ampat, leaving it just for 20 years to chill, to relax, to let them recover on its own. It really is possible, right? I think that's
and also I wanted to add, like, Raja Ampat was like a multi-million-dollar conservation project under 3 biggest NGO that works together to make that happen. And you can imagine how many Indonesia's reefs need that and don't get the chance. So it's a complex problem.
I mean, I was gonna point out, just jumping in here completely, I know we have a couple minutes left where we do want to leave audience in, but budget wasn't a barrier. None of you mentioned it. What is your perspective there? Tell me a little bit more. Why was that not coming at the top of your heads here? Because too many times we hear that budget is what keeps us back. At least that's what industry leaders tell. It's what government creates. So it's a big excuse out there. Why did none of the young change makers say that? Felix, I see you nodding. You want to start?
Well, it's true. In part, I didn't mention it because it's a less interesting answer, I guess. But a part of it, and of course, like, please give us a plan for the planet more money. But if it were that easy, that money alone could solve it, right? Ideally, any country of the global north would love, or the global north in general as a more abstract, the international community would love to just give Indonesia a couple of billions if that only meant that no part of the rainforest would ever be cut down again. And that's essentially what Norway is trying. Is using that rather simple mechanism. Will give the Indonesian government a couple of billion, and then they will stop it. That's exactly why I talked about these institutional structures, because if it were that easy, Norway would have solved it, or other countries would have jumped on board with Norway to provide that necessary funding, because the value that this forest provides to the global community as an intact forest is, of course, way higher than that rather slim income from palm oil. Of course, that money, it's obviously not just palm oil, but that money is, of course, valuable to the local community and to Indonesian and international companies. But the money they derive is far smaller than the value that this forest provides to us all. So if it were truly monetary, and if our capitalist system went that far that it could truly monetize it in that way, then I guess it would be so much easier to protect those forests.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to hear on Nesha, because I see you have the biggest smile on your face at the moment as well. And what you were saying as well kind of inspired me to think and maybe narrow the question towards a different area of focus, which is, creating a nature tax, right? Putting value on nature in the sense of a monetary sense. How do you think that is the right approach in the work that you're in? Has that been a conversation you're familiar with? Nesha, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because that's basically what happened. I would give the example of Raja Ampat because I think that's a really good case study, because that was created basically an MPA with the people and not by national government. And they basically, all the 3 biggest NGO work together with the local government to create this tax where you come into the marine park and you have to pay. And that's what's basically paying for the patrol to monitor the whole area. And even then, like what Felix said, monetary doesn't really solve everything. Otherwise, nature conservation will be solved already. But as you said, usually when these monetary funds that, billions and billions of dollars that comes in, it's to big NGOs. And I think this is a good continuation to the question where grassroots movement is very important, because most of the biggest NGO, they're very much focused on the policy, and it's very important. Definitely, we need top-down and grassroots to connect the dots. And sometimes when you give the money to the big NGOs and they create all these policies, they don't really have the time to actually talk to the people on the ground thoroughly, like most grassroots movements do. So when they work together with grassroots movement, that I think that's a much more, powerful project, and you basically can catch every bit of it. But if you don't, it's basically you're trying to make rules to people who doesn't even understand, for example, in the forest of Borneo, what is the value of the forest? If I can get quick money from palm oil buying off my land, why shouldn't I do that if I don't understand what is the meaning of this one tree, what is the meaning of this farm, jungle pharmacy.
Right.
So yeah,
I think it's that long-term concept, right, that we often see as I think that's one of the biggest barriers, because we think too short term. And that's our role as young people, to think about the bigger picture in mind, to understand that it's a lot bigger than a politician 4 years in office. It's a lot bigger than, the amount of time you're going to be CEO of something. This is a matter of our future and our world. Aishwarya, I don't know if you have anything to add or input to that question.
No, not really much. I would really second what Nesha said, that people don't understand the economic value of our forests, our wetlands, our natural ecosystems. Because if they did, then they wouldn't sell them off for a little bit of money that they usually think that it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So they don't really understand that. And like even what Felix said, if money would solve everything, then probably there would be no climate change. There would be no nature conservation problems at all. Like, world would be happily set, everything sorted. But one more thing that I would probably like to add is that from a different angle is we can probably have a system of green tax. So wherein companies which promote a conservation, which are actively working to protect the environment in terms of corporate social responsibility, they can be given tax incentives. Whereas companies which have a higher carbon footprint can be, taxed for polluting the environment. So it kind of works both ways. So it awards companies who are extremely efficient, sustainable, and companies which are not, it provides a disincentive for them, and it promotes them to better their ways and be more carbon efficient.
I know. I think, that really interests me. Felix, you were going to unmute yourself. Share. I love this thread.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to jump in to absolutely agree with what you just said there. It's absolutely not the case that money plays no role, and taxation can be one of the most efficient ways to discourage certain actions. And taxation on clear cutting of forests, for instance, can be an important part of the strategy. And I also don't want to let the rich part of the world off the hook there by just saying, we've tried it once, it didn't solve everything. So, we can go back to what we were doing and let the Indonesians solve it by themselves. Obviously, it's a bit of an exaggeration there, right? It was incredibly valuable. I mean, very grateful to the Norwegian government for trying it and for continuing to try, and for trying it with other countries and trying to work with their approach there to make it work. So I'm sure it is part of the solution, but it doesn't solve it by itself.
And there we go, the catch line of almost every young change maker. We're getting there, but we could be doing more. And that's where I see all three of the speakers joining us tonight having the biggest smile, because I think we're all sitting on that secret that we know the potential just could be bigger, could be better. And I would like to now open it up to, I believe the team wrote me, and the first question of this evening from the audience joining us will be Danisha. Please unmute yourself and show us your screen. And go ahead with introducing yourself a little bit before asking the question to the audience. Danisha, hello.
Hi everyone, I'm Danisha, I'm 15. I'm currently in Dubai, so yeah, it's pretty far from, Jakarta, but I was actually raised there. Anyways, my question for you all is, Who are the key players in the problem and solution for nature conservation?
Thank you, Denisha. I love it. 15 years old and already asking to the point questions. Who wants to take it?
That's a very good question. There's definitely a few when it comes to the field that I'm in, and I'm pretty sure it's sort of similar to the ones Felix and Aishwarya is in as well. Number one is the local community, whoever is the first stakeholder. In my case, is the fishermen and the coastal community. Number two is the local government, not the national government, but the ones that are handling the ones in the village or whatever. Number three, I don't know where you are or which country you are, but usually we have a cultural leader or adat leader. That one is a very much of important stakeholder, because sometimes the people in the area listen more to the cultural laws than the actual national law. So to have them in it, even sometimes it's not cultural law, it's sometimes religious leaders as well. So like priest or, ustad or something, they're very important. And obviously, if there's tourism in there, tourism sector is a very important stakeholder to be in it. Those three, I think, I'm speaking on a smaller scale, not a country scale, but like in an island scale, those three are very important in trying to push your project forward. And whoever, if there's already a conservation site in the area, you have to work together with them. In my case, it's a national MPA, so you have to work together with MPA management that's handling it. But that's like a national government. But even if then, you have to build a relationship with all of them. Being a youth and leading projects like this, it's kind of like teaches you how to be, diplomatic in the way you talk and, making everyone happy, but also trying to get your message across and not, kiss ass.
Agreed. Thank you for pointing that out, Nesha, and thank you for, letting us know your answer. I think just some context for the audience. MPA means Marine Protected Areas, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, just for context. Thank you for that. And I think I'll pass it on to Aishwarya. Aishwarya, what do you think is the one main problem, and what's the one main solution? So one key player and one solution to the issue.
Probably the one key player which I would say to nature conservation would be awareness. So probably more people who are aware that our planet needs to be protected, the better. And the key player is obviously the citizens of the country, of a place. Like Nesha said, the local community plays a very vital role at the grassroots level, and your government is again another big stakeholder in the whole thing. I'd also probably like to add the youth, because since the youth is the future of this planet, so we have to step up and take charge. There was this person whom I met at one of the functions. He leads a magazine, and in India, he's a very big environmentalist. His name is Mr. Betu Saigal. He always says that the youth, the young people, they have to step forth. It's not the older generation which has to take care of our planet. It is the younger generation which has to come forth. So they are one of the stakeholders that I feel was also the youth of today.
Thank you, Aishwarya. And that's exactly what we love to hear, young people, young people, young people. Felix, in the respective time, do you mind if we jump to the one other question we want to ask, and we'll pass it to you right after? Team, I know that you have notified me we'll be taking the question of Virginia, and we'll get the panelists to address it now. Virginia's question is, what do you think is more important? To have a plan about what to do, or just take action? Felix, we'll pass this hot potato over to you.
That's really hard to say. I mean, Plan for the Planet wouldn't exist if we had, planned a lot back then. It only existed because we tried something, we planted a tree, and we were insanely lucky in the process. It caught on and it turned into a movement. I don't know if, after long reflection, we would have concluded that this is the best strategy, but it happened to be the case. So I think that's a clear endorsement for that one part of it. But I think the most valuable work we've done over the years, the real conservation work or restoration work we are doing, that is in part the result of a lot more complex planning and a lot more preparing. But I feel like the one wonderfully enabled the other.
Okay, I like it, Felix. Thank you so much. Aishwarya, how would you answer this question? Plan or action?
Well, I would say a mixture of both. So you have at least some basic plan with you and then take action on that. Probably the results will be more structured, more better. But there again, it depends on situation to situation. Sometimes you just need to take action and without any plan, that's what works. And sometimes detailed planning is much better. So it goes against situation. I really can't pick one, but you can probably mix both at some stage.
Virginia, I hope you're still with us and listening into how they're responding to your questions. Nesha, what about you? Plan or action?
That's a very interesting question because I'm in two NGOs that's like, completely different and did both basically. But speaking that we're in a Youthopia talk, as a youth, since sometimes we don't know what to plan first, I would just take action first. And then along the way, if you get like a corona pandemic that you have to stay home, plan. That's when you get a time to plan.
Sure. Thanks so much, Nesha, for wrapping it up. Unfortunately, I wish we can, take this a little bit longer. We have a lot of questions from the audience and also questions from within the team, but we in respect of time for our speakers and for everyone here, we have to end our Youthopia talks for tonight. Thank you so much to our audience. If you have any more questions, please feel free to reach us through our Instagram, through Instagrams of Aishwarya and Felix, Plant for the Planet, and also Nesha. And for the Indonesian Manta project, we'll send you all the information at the chat section and also through Instagram. Thank you for that. And is there anything you'd like to add, Melati?
I was just gonna jump in, Esta, just again to hone in to just how grateful we are that you're all joining us in the space of Utopia. Right here from Bali, it's a Friday night. So to all of those youngsters watching in, thank you for joining us all around the world as well. We had an insightful conversation listening from frontline changemakers about their experience. We talked a little bit about the difference between, nature conservation and nature restoration, the importance and the potential of a green tax, nature tax, putting value onto trees, onto a square meter of ocean. How do you do that? And will that be enough to actually get people to start changing? So all of these big topics, these big discussions is what we were able to dive into a little bit tonight. We're so happy and grateful that you were able to join us. Before we do go, I would like to ask everybody, a little tradition that we have been setting here on Youthopia is actually asking the audience at this point in time to unmute themselves, share your video, and for us to take a group virtual screenshot of tonight's gathering. So please, this is the moment to share your video, unmute yourself, say a little bit of a hello. Hi, everybody. This is my favorite part when we go on gallery view, just seeing all of you guys joining in. Hello, hello. So cool. Thank you, everybody. So awesome that you're joining. Again, to follow in, we'll be sharing the speakers' details and their information, their amazing organization. Once again, a big thank you to Felix from Plant for the Planet, Aishwarya, wildlife videographer and photographer in India, and Nesha right here in Indonesia with the Indonesian Manta project.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Melati. Thanks, Utopia.
Yeah, thank you for hosting us.
Woo! Amazing. Everybody have a beautiful rest of the evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.